Hi everyone, this is my run on the Ambition for Provenance Lufenia stage, which is Kamlanot's Lufenia stage, and this submission is specifically for the TCC challenge. And as always, I will be including a timestamp in the video description that you can use to skip ahead to the section that you are interested in. I'll be going through quickly the requirements for the TCC challenge, and then I'll be going through a quick overview of the fight, specifically geared towards the challenge itself, the party setup that I use, and the overall strategy before I head into the battle. So coming to this TCC challenge, there are 4 banned units that you cannot use in your main party, which is Kamlanot, Lightning, Eldnach, and Edward. You can use any unit, including any of the 4 units, as your friend support unit, and beyond that, you cannot enter into burst phase. If your friend support unit does have a burst weapon, you can use the burst attack on your friend unit, but if any of your main party members has a burst weapon equipped, you cannot click or hit their burst ability. Beyond that, you can use any other summon that you want, and it may seem like a very straightforward Lufenia, but given the banned units, the tricky thing is to actually prepare for the orb attack. So I'll cover that in the next section. Okay, so coming to the overview of the fight and the party setup that I use, it's just a single wave comprising of a pair of Protean bosses, which is a gargoyle type of monster. And there are 3 key things that you need to prepare for the challenge. The first and foremost, of course, is the Lufenia orb. There are various ways to handle the orb, and I will mention 2 very interesting ways before I head into my strategy that I used. So firstly, the orb trigger isn't a guaranteed hit. So if you have characters with evasion, you can actually dodge the orb trigger attack. And I think notably, H shines here because he grants your entire party evasion through his EX. It's also notable because this Lufenia stage only has the orb appearing once. So if you can actually evade the orb trigger attack, the orb will never reappear again, and you're then able to complete the fight without ever seeing the orb a second time. You can also consider using characters with an innate last stand passive, such as Garnet, Ares, Y'shtola, or Vivi. As long as they have more than 50% health, they can actually survive the countdown attack. However, it leaves everyone without buffs, and you need to quickly heal immediately after because everyone will be at very low HP. The third way to deal with the orb, of course, is to increase the orb count by disabling the bosses, which is the strategy that I used for my run. The key disablers, however, are banned in the TCC challenge, so Kamlanot, Eldnach, and Edward actually makes the fight noticeably easier because they can very easily increase the orb count. There are still, however, other disablers. Raijin is a very good example, and then of course Shantotto herself is a synergy unit and isn't actually banned in the TCC challenge. And then lastly, you also have your units with HP attack disable, such as Kefka and Arciela. The only drawback with HP attack disable is that it only works to increase the orb count if the boss happens to be using an HP attack on that turn. If you're relying on HP attack disable, if the boss unleashes a standard brave attack, the orb count will not increase and will actually continue to decrease. So you do need to take that into consideration. The second thing you need to consider and prepare for is the concentrate stance that the boss has. So every now and then you will see the warning sign that the boss is concentrating, and the game also tells you this because the boss will gain a yellowish aura around it. When it is concentrating, it's a signal that its next attack is going to be a very devastating attack, usually in the form of a tail hit plus. And essentially, tail hit plus is more or less an instant KO attack. It's a guaranteed hit. It will dispel all your buffs before landing the HP damage. So for example, if you're relying on Warrior of Light's shield, or Bash's Indomitable buff, or Gladiolus' blink to mitigate the HP damage, all those buffs will be dispelled and you will actually take full damage from tail hit plus. The way to get around tail hit plus again is you can rely on last 10 innate passive characters, or ideally you want to disable the boss because the concentrate yellow aura will only last for one turn, one boss turn, and if the boss happens to be disabled on that turn, the concentrate aura will dissipate and the boss will not use tail hit plus on its next turn anymore. Considering that you can increase the Lufenia orb counter by disabling the boss, it makes sense then to also use disables to prevent the boss from using tail hit plus. It's a bit easier to use one mechanic or one strategy to deal with two different mechanics in this fight. The third thing that you really need to consider is that a lot of the attacks that the boss has, especially the group attack hop spin, has low turn rate, and while hop spin doesn't have an HP attack built into it, at the later parts of the fight when the bosses gain increases in their stats, in particular speed, hop spin can actually lead to the boss getting another turn instantly after the attack. And because hop spin is a group brave attack, it usually leads to the boss getting a lot of brave from that attack and then unleashing an HP attack and killing you after that. So for me, the third way to get around this is to inflict some sort of turn rate down or speed rate down debuff on the boss, or of course you can consider using Leviathan Summon, which brings an innate 10% speed down blessing on the bosses. Because of the high speed that the bosses have near the end of the fight, it is also generally recommended to save the summon for the near tail end of the fight, so that you can have that window of time to burst down the bosses before they get a chance to unleash their hop spin attack at that part of the fight. So coming to the strategy that I use and the party setup, because I don't really have age build up, so I cannot rely on the evasion strategy, I decided to just rely on the standard disabling the bosses during their turn. So first and foremost, my top pick for it would be Shantotto. She is a synergy unit for this event, so she deals significant DPS. On top of that, her LD is guaranteed paralysis, which means that it's a very reliable way to increase the Lufenia orb counter, and of course to deal with the concentrate yellow aura attack. The only downside to Shantotto is that her paralysis is only tied to her LD, and you only have 3 users of her LD, so it is very limited use of paralysis available. Because of that, I decided to supplement Shantotto with Arciela, because Arciela has HP attack disable, and notably in the concentrate yellow aura form, the next attack that the boss will do is tail hit plus, which is an HP attack. So debuffing them with HP attack disable when they are in the yellow aura also guarantees that they will not use tail hit plus, and will also increase the Lufenia orb counter during that turn. So having 2 different disables in the form of Shantotto paralysis as well as Arciela's HP attack disable should buy me enough time to kill off the bosses, and increasing the orb, the Lufenia orb counter, before my skills that can disable have run dry. To supplement this, my third character I felt needed to be someone with high DPS so that I can consistently damage down the boss. Like I said before, I run out of disabling skills. So my pick for the third character would be Vivi. I felt that Vivi also synergizes quite nicely with Shantotto because both of them has poison built into their kit. And so even if the bosses get some amount of brave, a lot of it will be siphoned off away with the poison and sap effects that you have. And of course, Arciela is able to heal Vivi in case you need it. However, I don't think healing is much of an issue in this fight. The friend unit that I use happened to be Lightning in this fight. But really, I think any high damage friend unit is sufficient. So Kuja is also another fantastic choice, especially near the end of the fight where you can just spam Kuja's LD for significant burst damage to bring down the bosses quickly at the same time. Beyond that, you can also consider friend units with disables built into their kit. So for example, a Shantotto friend support is also another excellent choice because then you have an emergency button if you really need to desperately paralyze the boss for whatever reason. You can always just swap in the support unit with disable and inflict paralysis on the boss. So that's also another viable strategy for friend unit. However, if you play your paralysis or your disabling skills very carefully and you use them at the right moments, you do not actually need more disables beyond what Shantotto and Arciela provides. That should be more than sufficient to allow you to actually complete the fight. So because of that, I went with the Lightning friend support. So that's it. With that said, I'll see you in the actual battle itself. See you there. Okay, so starting off in the fight, because the Lufenia orb isn't present at the start, I decided to go a little bit slower on the DPS and save Vivi's LD for when the boss is very near to 80% of their health. So starting off the fight is just a matter of coming up with steady DPS across all three characters. I also tend to try to save more of Arciela's dissension skills for the later parts of the fight where I need to inflict HP attack disable. So I started off with one free skill used for her, and then I was actually just spamming HP attacks with Arciela until her EX charges at the start of the fight. Okay, you really need to watch out for this warning prompt saying concentrating, because when it appears, you do need to somehow disable the boss, either by using Arciela's dissension for the HP attack disable, or using Shantotto's LD to paralyze. So you need to keep a very close eye on the turn order, and I decided to use Arciela's EX first because referring to the turn order, she does get another turn right before the Protean A will get to use Tail Hit Plus. So I can still get off a dissension. Okay, so the Lufenia orb is very close to appearing. It will appear once any boss drops below 80% health. And because I've just fired off Vivi's EX, so I felt this was really the best time to start using his LD. If you also time Vivi's LD use to be right before Arciela uses her EX, the good thing about this is Arciela's EX will immediately heal most of the HP drain from the LD use, so you still remain relatively healthy afterward. Right when the orb appears, you cannot wait too long before you start using Shantotto's LD to paralyze, because what I find is that the turn order of the bosses actually gets pushed back around this stage. So if you are hoping to wait until the orb comes down to like 5 or 6 count before paralyzing the boss, you will find yourself in a situation where the orb will actually trigger before the boss actually gets a turn. So it's actually better to just paralyze with Shantotto when the orb count is roughly at about 10. So this is actually a good example of the risk that you're taking if you wait too long. So Protean B's orb is only at 7 count, and you can see from the turn bar that it's quite far off before it gets a turn. So at this point, you do want to be very careful on abilities with high turn rate, because if you use attacks such as Vivi's Focus or Arciela's Rage Arrow, it is possible that you see their turn push up before the boss get their turn, and this will lead to the orb ticking down by another count because you get another turn before that. So you really need to ensure that at the very least the orb count is at 1 when the boss gets a turn. So just nicely, Protean B actually got a turn when the orb counts at 1, and I managed to increase it to 16 again, so all is well and good. However, Protein B decided to use Concentrate right at this time, and I was hoping to nail it with Arciela's HP attack disable, but unfortunately Arciela actually will act after boss B gets a turn, which is really not ideal. It is targeting Vivi, and Vivi actually has a last stand, so technically Vivi can survive the hit, but it will dispel all of his buff. I tried to use 2 of Shantotto's AA to see whether or not I can trigger the boss Brave regioning back again so that I can break them and push them back one turn so that Arciela can get an HP attack disable in. Unfortunately, that didn't work either. So I really didn't have a choice here, and I used Shantotto's second LD, even though the orb count is still relatively healthy. So not really optimal, but I decided to push on to see whether or not I can still make do with her third and final LD the later part of the fight to hopefully buy me enough turns to finish off the boss. So one good thing about Arciela is that her Ascension skill also comes with a Dispel effect. So when the boss shields itself, like what Protean A did here, using Ascension actually dispels the shield and allows you to break the boss after that, which is quite handy. At this point on the fight also, because Shantotto only has one more LD skill yet left, you want to try to use more of Arciela's Dissension here, because if you get lucky and the Dissension HP attack disable actually prevents the boss from doing an attack, then it will also increase the orb counter, allowing you to save Shantotto's LD for a slightly later part of the fight. So the orb is at 10 count, and I decided to use Shantotto's LD here because I felt that if I waited another boss turn, I might not get another chance to disable the boss and increase the orb counter anymore after this. So I decided not to take the risk and just use Shantotto's last LD here. Okay, so the boss is concentrating again, which gives it the yellow aura. So its next attack is going to be Tailspin plus. But I checked its debuffs just to make sure HP attack disable is still on. And it still has one more turn of HP attack disable. So I'm not too worried. Its next turn will actually be prevented because of that. Okay, I wasn't sure whether this all attack would be an HP attack or just a hop spin. So I decided to use Arciela's Dissension here to inflict them with HP attack disable. I'm really hoping that it will be an HP attack. They do have a group HP attack here. And so Protein A was actually preparing an HP attack, so the HP attack disable actually prevented that and increased the orb counter to 20. And here I'm hoping that it's also the same for Protein B. So luckily here Protein B also happens to be using an HP attack, so again the HP attack disable prevented that and also increased its orb counter to 20. So at this stage both bosses are at 30% health and they have a full 20 count on the orb counter. So I'm pretty confident that I can finish them off, particularly because I also still have my summon and friend unit intact. I was actually considering here to just finish off the fight without using either the summon or the friend unit, but it is pretty risky because at this stage of the fight the bosses do have significantly higher speed and you are taking a big risk. I was thinking that I can just spam Dissension with Arciela, and if the boss always has HP attack disabled, they can't actually kill me off. But really I just decided to play safe and popped my summon. Okay, so because the orb count is running to be a bit low, and it is very difficult to tell when the boss is actually going to do an HP attack, so I didn't want to continue to rely on Arciela's HP attack disable to increase the orb counter, hence I popped my summon. I decided to swap out Arciela for lightning because at this stage of the game I don't really need her healing or support, and the idea here is to quickly just burst down the bosses, so it's better to have 3 units that can deal heavy DPS rather than having a support unit in the field at this stage of the game. With lightning, I went fully 4 LD into her burst attack. Her LD does more than 200,000 damage on a single target, so I was focusing on the Protean with the lower orb counts because of course you want to kill off that boss before the orb ticks down to 0. So summon has ended, The reason why I used all of our LD inside the summon is that it also pushes the boss turn significantly back. So if you look at the turn order now, I have many turns before the bosses get a turn. And so I can just comfortably continue to deal damage to them even after summon animation has ended. I use Lightning's Burst on Protean A because Protean B only has 6% health left, and I'm pretty confident that splash damage alone will kill off Protean B. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you do, please leave a like, comment or subscribe. Really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you in the next Lufenia fight. Bye bye.